did not mince his words. He told you like it is. And he reminded you once more that God helps those who also help themselves. Manna is not going to fall from heaven. My brother, Reverend Maponga, in his many lectures, he has also reminded us the symbolism of the Bible and how we must read it and how we must understand it and how we must relate it to our own culture. To you too, Mzukuru, I honor you.
And you go.
As we were discussing with Mai last night, I said, my dear daughter, what do you want me to talk about? What message do you want me to share with the young people of Zimbabwe and those of you who may have come from outside Zimbabwe? She says, Mom, we don't know our history. That's our problem. So I said, I can do that. The question is, where do I begin? 400 years ago, I guess all of you are saying, oh my God, we better have dinner ready. Over 400 years ago, the children of Africa were taken out of Africa and were enslaved. When they arrived in the Americas, there was a famous man by the name of Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch had figured out a way of disciplining his slaves in such a way that when you deal with one generation, the slaves will be obedient for the next 400 years. What is an example of what Willie Lynch did to the slaves? He would tie a man, one leg on one horse facing to the right, and another leg on a horse facing to the left. He would particularly want to have pregnant women come and watch, children, relatives, and then he will crack the whip and hit the horses. And as the horses take off in opposite directions, he would split the men into two. This was a way of conditioning the black man and the black woman, including those who are yet to be born, letting them know that if you disobey the white man, this was the fate that awaits you. Fast forward. The black man and the black woman remains in that same state of mind of fear of the white man. While they were doing that to the enslaved Africans in the Americas, back home in Africa, they were sending missionaries with specific instructions on how to condition the African to be obedient. They were specifically told, teach them how to read, but not to reason. King Leopold had specific instructions to the missionaries who were sent in advance to subdue the Africans and teach us to turn another cheek. So by the time the real thieves came behind, we were so submissive, we never argued. We gave it all up. They want one loaf of bread, we say, oh, we got 100 more in the back, here they are. So it is colonization and Christianity set foot in Africa for the sheer purpose of finding a way of stealing and exploiting the Africans. But pretty soon, as greed might have it, they themselves started fighting on how to effectively loot the Africans. So for fear of having a European war on the African soil, they got together in Berlin, Germany. From November of 1884 to February of 1885. They strategized on how they could effectively and once and for all defeat the continent. So it is we were divided into tiny little economies that we are today. Economies that clearly cannot survive on our own unless we unite. It is for the very reason that our Pan-African fathers met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963 to try and recreate and rebuild and destroy the boundaries that were created by our colonizers. Our Pan-African leaders understood very clearly that until Africa unites, nothing, and I mean nothing that we do, is going to give us the sustainability that we need. In the 1940s, as the Africans were beginning to wake up, we began to demand our independence. The independence was slowly given. Some African countries had to fight for the liberation. But what we got was political liberation. What they denied us was economic liberation to this day. 1939 to 1945. You know, the Europeans are very good at fighting. If you look at their history, it's a history of nothing but the European tribes fighting each other. So just like they had done during World War I, 1939 to 1945, it was a vicious war, which they called, and to this day, World War II. Come on now. The rest of the world was not at war. It is the European nations who were fighting among themselves, and they used their influence to recruit from other countries, including this country. At that time, it was called Rhodesia. Our soldiers, black Zimbabwean soldiers, while they were being forced to go fight in the European tribal war, their land was being repossessed, being reacquired. And when they came back from fighting the Second World War, while their white counterpart soldiers were being given more land, the Zimbabwean soldiers who fought in the Second World War, they were given bicycles. So in addition to losing their land, they got a bicycle. And you should be happy about that. So it is 1945, the European tribal war ended, aka Second World War. They wondered how on earth are they going to rebuild a Europe that had been completely devastated after the Second World War. Europe was finished. So it is the then Secretary of State for the United States, by the name of Marshall, the United States gave $13 billion to start the reconstruction of Europe. They call it the Marshall Plan. Now, how much construction can you do with 13 billion? What they don't tell you is that the majority of the reconstruction of Europe post-Second World War was funded through theft from Africa, through exploitation of Africa. But then they decided, just like they did during the Berlin Conference, they set out to organize themselves so they can effectively steal from the global South nations. Majority, of course, are Africans. So they quickly got together, a few countries, and they created what they call the Bretton Woods institutions. That is the World Bank and IMF. The sole purpose for the creation of these institutions was to see to it that their success is based on the failures of the global South nations, not for the benefit. So it is, the institutions were created and the stealing from the Africans began. They even had special hitmen who were called economic hitmen. They played all kinds of games to make sure that they will siphon as much as they could. And I'm going to stick to Africa. They will come to a country like Kenya. They say, Kenya, you need a dam for electricity. We're going to be sending you experts, economists that are going to come up with a budget of how much this dam is going to cost you. The reality of the matter is, this dam may have cost 500 million, but the big economists from the West, in collaboration with the Bretton Woods institutions, they will come in and say, this dam is going to cost 5 billion. And then World Bank will jump in and say, don't worry, Kenya, we are going to fund the 5 billion. And then, of course, the jackals come behind, the Moody's rating agencies come in. Oh yes, we must look at your country, and they give your country the worst rating. World Bank comes back and say, you know what? We're going to give you the 5 billion, but interest rate is 20%. This cycle of getting Africa hung, self-lynched economically through this financial institution began.
Corruption.
One project after another, the economic hitmen were in full play. They did everything they could to give these frivolous loans to African countries. Loans they knew very well that African countries will never be able to repay. It didn't end there. Then they created an entity called United Nations. Again, an entity that was designed to make sure that the exploitation of Africa and her natural resources will continue. And where countries were trying to stand tall and defend themselves and refuse to sell their natural resources for peanuts, instabilities would suddenly come up in that country. NGOs started popping up, coming in as saviors to Africa. We are going to help you. And yet there's real reason for being in Africa was to see how they can maintain the instability, keep the turmoil going, so they can continue to siphon our natural resources out of Africa. They said we need another organization that can really make sure that what we are doing is a resounding success. So they created the World Trade Organization. You see, there's a man with his wit in Ukraine. And there's a woman in Zimbabwe with cotton. World Trade Organization will dictate the price of the wheat coming out of Ukraine to Zimbabwe, but they will also dictate the price of the cotton out of Zimbabwe to Ukraine. And then they will say, this is the price for the wheat, which is obviously inflated, and they will lower the price of the cotton out of Zimbabwe. So the Zimbabwean woman, being who she is, she figures she has a budget. This is how much money she needs to make. So she works twice as hard. The next season, she has a bumper crop and her productivity is double. Here comes the jackals again. This time, when you sold your cotton last year, the dollar was 1 zig, or rather $1 to 20 zigs. But because they've done their math, you have a bumper crop. So they send in their rating agencies. Once again, they talk to your central bank. They devalue your dollar. So now, the dollar is $1 to 40 zigs. So for the same amount, Ukraine is going to buy double the amount of cotton, and the woman in Zimbabwe has gained absolutely nothing. My brothers and sisters, I am talking about the institutions that were created after the Second World War, never to benefit us. Are you in tune with what is happening in your world? Are you understanding the dynamics that what is happening in Washington, what is happening in Paris, what is happening in London will affect your ability to be an effective innovator? Are you connecting the dots?
Yeah.
Are you getting your world and what your world is? Our Pan-African fathers tried to create an Africa that was united, an Africa that spoke with one voice, an Africa that we know very clearly the only way to survive is when we speak with one voice, one mind, one heart, as children of one mother Africa, united. Failure to do so, Africa shall forever be defeated. In the United States today, we have President Trump, who I must say, when it comes to his international global policies, I find him to be a breath of fresh air. He did an analysis. He said, well, you NGOs, you're going in and doing all this regime change. Show me the money. Where did the US benefit? He didn't find the money. So he said, get rid of USAID. Some of you were crying. Oh my God, USAID is out of Africa. What are we going to do? Are you crazy?
You better preach now.
Do you understand this entity and what they have been doing? Criminals of the highest order. They needed to go. And not only USAID, but any other Western NGO. We do not need their peanuts.
Yeah.
So for those that want to complain, don't get lost in the bravado when you analyze the global policies coming out of the United States. Let's leave domestic policies alone. Americans can deal with that. President Trump is also saying, I don't really care what your government is doing. You got some gold, I want it. The question is, are you willing to give it to him for the price? Because he's going to come in and say, I'll give you 10 cents. Are you willing to accept the 10 cents? Or are you going to assemble your best and your brightest to go to the negotiating table? The opportunity that President Trump is bringing to the world, even though those opportunities were not intended to benefit us. Let me make sure everybody's clear about that. You see, some of you are familiar with the medication called Ozempic, the one for weight loss. Do you know how that medication came to be? It was intended for diabetes. But they found out that patients who were diabetic, who were overweight, when they took Ozempic, they also lost weight. Positive side effect. They also found out that patients who were diabetic, who were given Ozempic and had a heart condition, their heart got better. Positive side effect. They found out that if you are on Ozempic for diabetes and you got kidney disease, your kidney function began to improve. I'm saying to you, my brothers and sisters, our young daughters out there, that in my book, President Trump is Africa's Ozempic. While he's focusing on US America First agenda, a lot of his global policies are good for Africa. A situation that we have not had in Africa, where Western countries are coming to us and they are willing to negotiate with African countries as equal partners. To say, forget the past. You got something I want and I got something you need. Let's negotiate. The question is, Zimbabwe, are you ready to assemble your best and brightest so they can negotiate with the world when they come to the table? Are you ready when President Trump pulls a gangster move like he did with President Ramaphosa? Are you ready to pull out a gangster move right back? Yeah. Or are you going to be an African who's scared? Because you happen to be sitting in front of a white person, your legs buckling. That African has no business being in government. Minister, get rid of them. Yeah. We want ministers. We want people supporting the minister. That when the minister sends them out there to represent Zimbabwe, to represent Kenya, to represent Africa, they are going to be the best and the brightest. They are not going to sell us out. They are going to show up with a Pan-African mind. A mind that says, may the best man win. And we are going to beneficiate our natural resources. It is an opportunity of a lifetime for Africa. Young people, do you see this as an opportunity, yes or no? Yes. If those two things, African countries can be allowed to run their countries without outside interference, African countries can be allowed to negotiate for our natural resources as equals, Africa will move forward. So young children, Do you understand your world? Is your mind awoken enough that you understand the role that you are going to play in the new Africa today? The new Africa of today is not looking for young people. All they want is a US dollar to go to America, a British pound, and an opportunity to go to Britain. This moment is calling for young people like Minister Muchangwa, who at a young age, she had it within herself to say, there is something going on that is terribly wrong in Rhodesia. And that, if I go east, there's a country called Mozambique that is sympathetic to my cause. That I'm going to get there,
get it done,
and I'm going to learn how to fight. I'm going to learn how to use a gun, and I'm going to come back and do my part.
Shoot some white
to liberate.
Shoot the
my
boar.
Zimbabwe.
Shoot the
Are
boar.
you that kind of a young person?
Kill the farmer.
We don't need to get a gun like Minister Mchanga. This time our gun is our mind. Do you understand your history? Like the Deputy Minister said, we can't keep going back to President Mnangagwa. He has done his part. We can't keep going back to Minister Mchangwa. They've done their part. They carried the gun. They gave it all up. They risked their own lives to liberate this country. Hello. The war that's in front of us today is the war of the mind. It's about economic liberation. They gave us political liberation. You and I and everybody, we have a responsibility to deliver economic liberation.
Yes, no.
But to do so, we must be armed with knowledge. Knowledge of Zimbabwe alone is not enough. Knowledge of Africa alone is not enough. It's knowledge of the world and how the world works. Because you're going to have to be part of it. Are you awake, alert, and oriented to step up and do your part? I have to start by saying, I apologize to all of you young people. We, as your old elders, we own your ignorance. The reason you don't know some of the things you should know is because we did not teach you. So hold us accountable. Call us out. And we too must be prepared to take that responsibility on, but also be prepared to do something